Okay, guys, welcome back to the channel. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I've had a lot of videos that had to do with vibration control and mainly just testing how effective it was with a seismograph app in terms of reducing vibrations. And that's important in terms of determining if the product actually works and doing what it says it's doing, vibration control. And you can use a little bit of intuition to know that, especially on things like speakers or turntables, where the whole purpose of those devices is to create precise vibrations as its main function. And to perform effectively, you would think if you can control the vibrations that are extraneous and not part of what the piece of equipment is trying to do, that you're helping things. But let's have the rubber meet the road and let's talk about some of the other benefits tangible coming out of the speaker from controlling vibrations. As you can see, this is again totally suspended from the floor, totally decoupled. And like I've shown in my previous video, so please watch those if you haven't. This is kind of like a summary, next step kind of video on the importance of, I found, with decoupling versus coupling in the tests that I've done. And the reason why I'm doing this video is kind of to even go back in terms of what made me start this, go down this road anyway. I've always just done what most people done, coupling spikes or aftermarket isoacoustic things, which do have a little bit of movement and decoupling, not a lot though. And also you have these ceramic ball type isolation devices, you have still points, you have vibropods. Those are the common ones that you see, but decoupling to this level is a totally different thing that fascinated me. And the reason I went down this path is because nothing else was working for something that was audible. And when I say audible, it may not just be from what's coming out of the speakers, but it might be what the speaker is doing itself, resonating. Almost any speaker you buy, outside of maybe, mega dollar YG acoustics that are made out of a billet of aluminum, which are totally inert, or at least effectively inert in most cases and at most volumes, you're going to have a speaker that there is some compromise in the chassis, the box, if it's a box speaker, or in this case, one thing that's a big problem with planar speakers like Maggie's and in this case B&G planar driver is that they are very tall, very wide, and it's very tough to put them in an inert cabinet or any kind of structure that doesn't add to vibrations. And as such, a lot of people will dismiss these kind of drivers as having, when they A/B it against a piston driver or whatnot, and they'll say, these seem like they have more distortion or whatnot. Well, I'm convinced that in most cases, it's not the actual driver that's producing more distortion. It's actually the fact that it's harder to get a cabinet to confine these drivers and also Maggie's that are totally inert and totally decoupled such that it's not getting influenced by its own vibrations that it's creating. So just the factor of the form and size and nature of some of these drivers impacts their performance threshold, assuming you don't do anything about it. And then a lot of speakers at budget, especially Maggie's, which are at a lower budget, they have to sacrifice somewhere. And one of the reasons why they are a little bit cheaper than other speakers and get a good level of performance is because there isn't a lot put into the structure supporting it. And you've seen with aftermarket things like Peter Gunn's modded Maggie's, and you've seen the My stands, things that, if you ask Peter Gunn, he does do crossover mods, but really he'll say 90%, I think is what he told me, of what his mod does is just putting that structure around a Maggie adds so much more dynamics and allows the drivers to perform better and, mitigate some of the weaknesses that come with the stock model. Now, I haven't tried the Peter Gunn ones, but I'm convinced that he's probably right on that. I've tried the My stands, and I can see where, yes, by inherent nature, a Maggie's going to have some slap at certain volume levels because it just can't, the excursion's just not there on that type of driver. But the additional aspect kind of negative part of their performance is the stand is not helping out much either. So I had that problem with these, and the reason I was able to diagnose it both with Maggie's and with these, just do a frequency sweep on you. Go to YouTube, play a frequency sweep. I've got one up here. Maybe it'll show up here. You can do a frequency sweep, and it's important to do these frequency sweeps on your system at very high levels, or at least the max levels that you are used to listening to music, because that's when you're going to excite resonance is usually at high levels. Certain low level playing is not going to excite a resonance and won't be a problem. So if you don't listen loud enough and you do a frequency sweep and nothing is problematic, then that's great. And that's why Maggie's do so well, especially in small rooms when people don't need to play them that loud, don't need to push them. The excursion's not creating a lot of vibrations and issues. So same thing here in this room, small room. I really didn't have it a lot, but when people would come over and want to play loud and their tastes are different than mine, you could definitely hear resonances with things like the grill and this wood, and things that just weren't made the sound unattractive once you got to a volume point. So I encourage you to go do a frequency sweep, play it at a loud level, and then sit next to your speaker like I'm doing here. And here, because at your listening position, you may get confused as to where the resonance is coming from. Is it one speaker or the other? It might blend in with the frequency. Normally, when you hear a frequency sweep, it should be very clean and equal at your listening position as it goes up and down. If you have unequal tones in there, or pops out or beams or anything like that, then those are issues that you need to deal with or live with. But when you hit a resonance point, it'll almost sound like distortion, but more like ringing is the more appropriate. And if you sit next to your speaker when you're doing it, you can look at the frequency that it's hitting, the volume you set it at, and then you can find where on your speaker it's resonating. And at one point I could play this like an instrument. This is a long baffle. It's about, if you've seen in my other videos, look at how long that is. And there's no bracing for it other than some screws into it, connecting it to the driver. And then it sits on a platform of a bass box. Very, not a lot of support, much like a Maggie. So at large volumes, this thing can resonate, and I was finding that in multiple points at certain volumes. Taking the grill off was huge. That eliminated a lot of it, but I still had to do more. And so I wanted to share with you some of the things I've done. It may help you if you have similar type speakers, or even in box speakers. Like I said, almost all of them are at budget levels, and they usually have to sacrifice in the cabinet. If it's not a billet of aluminum, or it's maybe like the Magico, so much bracing inside. If a lot of attention has not been paid to it, it's probably going to resonate at some point and be audible. Now, there are some speakers like Spendors and Harbiths and even megadollar ones like Lumen Whites that kind of work with the resonance of the cabinet, and they don't brace a lot because they use that to their advantage. But again, you can only control that resonance so much. At different volumes, it's going to resonate differently. So it's a difficult equation to do when you're not even trying to reduce the resonances and just work with it. But in any case, let me show you one of the few products I use to test. And one of them, you can get this, I think they sell them for speakers. You put them inside, they have the no-res and whatever, Duralex or something. This is Noeco. You can find it on Amazon. It's used for car vibrations, in your trunk. It's a very high vibration environment, a car. So obviously things that work in that environment should be suitable for here, and that's what I've found. This one is the thick foam, and it's really good for internally in your cabinet to reduce vibrations, but you can also use it on the exterior to add a little bit of mass and help with vibrations. Now be very careful when you're putting this stuff near drivers. You can cause issues with the dispersion, so you need to be careful. But these things can come on and off, so you can A/B it pretty easy. But this company also makes a thick tape, really thick, and that's another effective damping product to add mass. And where this is really light, that tape is almost like a really heavy tape to add mass. So you can combine the two, or do alternatives depending on what's resonating and what frequency you want to bring it down to. And I found that that's very effective. I've got a ton of this stuff on the back of the speaker where it resonates as a dipole, so it resonates in the back too. And I've been able to get rid of almost all the vibrations. And there's other things you can do too. I'm going to show you. These are kind of jimmy rig testing kind of things I did. But once you hear a resonance, it's just like if you're playing a guitar. If you want to stop the strings from resonating, you put your fingers on the strings to stop them and absorb the vibration. Well, you can do that. If you've got that issue, you can simulate putting your fingers on it and changing the resonant frequency of something that is vibrating with some very clever things that I've come up with. So I'll just show you these. I don't recommend them. They're good to test to see, if something works and the resonance can be controlled. But if you can find a way to work them in and make it work for you, fine. But I'll show you one thing is, let's see if I can move this. Well, if you see this here, this is just one of those shake things that you can use for exercising. If you just want to test to see if a little bit of bracing can help you, almost like a tripod type bracing from the back. I use this just to see if it changed the resonance of anything that was in my cabinet. Let me put this down. Also, another thing that can simulate holding your fingers on the top of something. Your fingers are like a pad and they put pressure down. But you don't want to put pressure down if you're using decoupling spikes and adding weight to it. So here's a clever solution I came up with, which actually works really good, is a bungee cord at the top. Now I've got it propped up by sorbethane so that I've got additional vibration control where the bungee cord hits the speaker. And then I tie the other end of the bungee cord to the stand at the bottom, the Townsend stand, so that I'm actually not adding pull down weight. If I was pulling it down to something outside of the speaker, yes, I'd be pulling it down, but I'm pulling it down from the top and pulling it up from the bottom. So I'm not adding any weight, but I am changing the resonance of the tension on this structure such that it'll change the resonant frequency. And so it's something that there is no formula for what will work, what won't work. You just have to try it, and there will be points where you make changes that make things worse. So be cognizant of that and be patient, because there's been times when I've just been like, I'm throwing these things away, I'm just going to buy new speakers, and that's a viable option. But once you work with them and you do all these things, it's a kind of a rewarding project to do, and you teach yourself a lot more about what impacts speaker performance than just what comes out of the driver and the specs of the driver. Vibrations going into the floor, from the floor into the speaker can impact it. That's why you want something like the Townsend sinks or some of the things that I've done and showed you in other videos. The cabinet itself is always going to have trade-offs, usually with speakers. Find out where the problem area is and see if you can supplement it with these products and mitigate, what is audible. Play the frequency sweep to prove to yourself it's audible. You can hear for yourself. And hopefully these suggestions, maybe you can come up with even better suggestions than I have. Feel free to leave comments. But again, subscribe, sign up for notifications, and we will see you soon.